All right, guys, we have Richard Banks, VP of Sales and Marketing over at HatchWorks, and he was kind enough to join us. Richard, let's dive right in. I'd love to start with your career journey. So, kind of, how you got started down the sales and down the marketing route, and let's chat a little bit about your journey.
So you're making me dig back into analog days almost here, even though I try to preach the digital side of the world, right? So yeah, so I have been in technology sales my entire career, and that's been about 35 years now. I started off early on with it, right after, believe it or not, this will date everything, when PCs had just kind of come out and they were just starting to get recognized. But I was focused more on these large things called mini computers. They were kind of like a miniature version of mainframes. And that, back in those days, everybody sold hardware, and then people developed custom software because these PCs hadn't proven what they call COTS, or commercial off-the-shelf software concept, that Microsoft helped us to define, and Apple kind of took it and ran with us as well. So yeah, we start off in the hardware world, and then we would come back and be big iron and all that kind of stuff. But I was part of that transformational stage where people were moving from that world to a desktop world, and that kind of, I think, has really defined my journey quite well, is how do you jump in and be part of where we're evolving, or as I would say, driving down the road looking through the windshield as opposed to focusing on the rearview mirror. So I started off with a local systems integrator in Atlanta, and that kind of morphed into a role with a large Japanese company that was focused into providing solutions into the engineering space, as well as into the telecommunications space. And so did very, very well in that role with that company. Again, we migrated from heavy on the hardware because the telecommunication solutions we had allowed us to bundle it up to be able to start providing total solutions. So again, I think to focus back on the journey, not just things that are transformational, but being able to provide an end-to-end solution for people, I think, is where I always like to be, and try to provide I guess never have to defend your product for being the cheapest, but for being the best. So that's kind of I've been very fortunate in that world, that always have had really, really smart people developing stuff that needed salespeople to help them figure out how to sell it.
Yeah, and
Um,
in that role, were you more inside sales or outside sales, or what was going on there?
So I guess when I started there, that we didn't really have much of that differentiation. You kind of were a little bit of both. You did cold calling or smiling and dialing. You would set up your appointments and use paper calendars, things called day timers for managing your schedules to in your calling lists and all that stuff. So we did it ourselves. And then over time that evolved, but into, of course, probably not until the late 90s, where you really kind of started differentiating and breaking up the different roles, where you had dedicated like BDRs and SDRs that would focus on bringing the leads. And then we focus on the high end, but always pretty much focused on, for lack of better terms, more of a named account type of role. So here's your 20, 25 target accounts in your geographic domain, and that you're going to be selling within specific verticals. And that's pretty much tracked across all those companies when I was an individual contributor. Um, I worked for so for the Japanese company, it was a very, very large multi-billion-dollar company. And I went to work for another one that was very focused into the CAD CAM space, but was focused back here in the United States, actually out of Huntsville, Alabama. And they were kind of like the godfather of CAD CAM and computer aided design. And so for those who may not know that, but they were real big in that space, and we focused really heavy and pushing the envelope in high end graphics like animation, and before even virtual reality was popular, kind of precursor to a lot of that technology. So it was really fun, and that's I guess part of my journey is a lot. I have a lot of fun because when you're with this innovative stuff, being innovative and showing cool stuff, and watching people's eyes open up when you could show them how much better we could do it, or different outcomes that we can push. And in that company, we actually started a brand new division. So it was a startup division that was within a company that was, I guess we're like a couple $1 billion company, probably about, 14,000 employees. So pretty good sized company. And then we came back and we started this new division. And that was my first promotion into being a sales leader as opposed to individual contributor. And I loved both of it because it was very entrepreneurial. You had to wear a bunch of hats, and you had to be the salesperson, you had to be the sales leader, you had to be the sales engineer, and the marketing person, and wear all those different hats. And it was really great. And the outcomes that we got were amazing. And I realized that I kind of got fortunate to get that opportunity before it was really bubbling up in that dot-com era. It was a little before in that pre-dot-com era in the late 90s. And I really started pursuing that as opposed to, oh, you got to work for big companies and focus on the big company model. And it really kind of got my experience and appetite very much excited from in the entrepreneurial world. So that's kind of where I've been. And for the last 20 years, I have focused on working with companies that are not usually startups, even though that one division I mentioned was a startup division with a company. I prefer to go to companies that have kind of figured out who they want to be when they grow up. They've got referenceable customers, they've got good use cases and we've basically proven that not the problems we want to solve, but we've got customers validating with business cases that of the problems we solved in their references. And then I come in and figure out how can we implement best practices and sales methodologies that can grow the company and scale it to the next level and beyond.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So tell me a little bit about, the journey into not necessarily the startup ones, but like you said, the ones that, they know what they want to be when they grow up. So, you've been engaged on a good amount of those. So I'd love to hear kind of, lessons or moves that you made or things that you've learned along the way.
Sure. Well, there's definitely a pattern. So typically what happens is when I go into a company, I've always got to have at least one person, typically it's a founder, but there's got to be somebody there that just gives you that aha feeling. So when I went to them, I was interviewing them as much as they were interviewing me. What is it that we're doing different? Because you don't have necessarily this army of people. You've got to have people that they're disruptive. They're doing something that's different that we can get out. And then they figured out what the difference is, and they needed somebody that leads sales that can turn that communication of how do you take this technology for solving business problems. So that's kind of where I like that, because not only do we think we solve them, we can now start demonstrating them, including, like I said, business cases with proven ROIs.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the place you're at now, I'm curious because you've been through so many different evolutions of, coming in on the revenue side and making sure it's successful. So I'm curious about, some of the plays you're doing now versus, what you were doing 20 years ago, because obviously it's evolved tremendously. So I'm curious about what you're doing now versus, what you were doing when, maybe in the last like 10 years.
So what I found is a pattern, and I kind of touched on it a second ago, but basically I am seeking for companies so if you see the track record of the companies, it's not just that type of profile of the founder or the special person, but they're usually companies that have some sort of innovative technology, or I'm sorry, they're innovative companies. So they're innovators, they want to do something different, and they have disruptive technologies to back that up. So once upon a time, it was what's the next cool thing? Like at one time when I was in the mobile space, hey, we got this new app or this way of launching apps that does something different that's going to drive different outcomes for people. And it's funny in that state because when you're interviewing with the companies, they typically, a lot of the companies always want to hire someone from their competitor. But when you go to a company that has innovative technology that is disrupting the world, typically there isn't a competitor, or they're in a new segment that is still being proven. So I think I really like that. That gives you that fun thing because you don't sell on being a commodity. We're not focused on price. It allows you to build that business case as saying, we will solve this problem for you. This is what you're going to get back from it. And that's been that consistent model across all companies. I guess the only differentiation is the type of technology and our success on execution.
Yeah, and I'm going through your history here. So tell me a little bit about, them, what that business model was like, kind of, when you walked in, what it looked like, and when you left, kind of, what you built out for them.
Sure. Well, so stable kernel was interesting. It was the first time all these companies I've mentioned to you have all been software companies for the past 20 years. I mentioned I started off in hardware, but immediately identified that hardware became that commodity that I don't like, and
Hmm.
software was the solution. It was the differentiation, and not to mention it allowed you to come in and customize it or personalize it for solving customer A versus customer B versus customer C's specific problem, maybe
Hmm.
in a different little way. So, or stable kernel, and by the way, HatchWorks is kind of a larger scale company that's doing a similar thing. These are both companies that are 100% services companies, but we're focused in developing custom software. So we're software companies, but we're all about services. So we had stable kernel was very focused into the mobile space. So they were developing mobile apps. The person that founded the company was a mobile app guru that actually was very involved in the early stages of teaching people how to develop on the iOS mobile platform. So he was very innovative and trained to keep people at companies like at Apple and Microsoft. He actually taught Apple engineers how to develop on their own platform, even though they're the ones that launched iOS. And so he became real recognized in that space, and that kind of gave the cachet to people kind of looking at the company and understanding what they wanted to do. But it's very focused in that space. And so this aha moment I tell you about is when I first interviewed with him, I'm like, well, I usually work for companies that have their own software, so our own intellectual property, as opposed to building software and handing it over to a customer and starting over again. And so it does touch on that area that I think is fun, that you're constantly in new projects. You're always inventing something new for different customers and solving their problems. But it also that it allowed us to basically to continue to morph and then just kind of and stay current with using in that at that time mobile apps for solving bigger problems and such as Internet of Things.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you left there, were you guys doing a lot of demand gen, a lot of, outreach? Like how was the rev side of the house set up?
So yeah, so it's a really great question because it was a typical kind of early stage environment where you had, in my case, I was coming to a company that was very young, and I know people always ask me, by the way, how do you like working with millennials? And I said, well, I think I've been working with millennials for like 30 years when
Yep.
I was the age of a millennial, because most of these earlier stage technology companies are attracting people that are they're typically younger because they'll work for a little less money, they're willing to take a little bit of equity, but they like the excitement. They like the culture and that fun thing of being able to come in and saying that, not just saying, but living the experience of changing our corner of the world, right? So it's really,
Hmm.
really fun. And so to that end, by working with again, the millennial aged people, I found that it's such a wonderful mix because they're so tech savvy. They're very comfortable with the technology, and then being able to transform them in their journey by leveraging these sales best practices and for solving it. But we use a lot of the current tools, stuff that is, for anywhere from freemium, free
Hmm.
products to very inexpensive, because basically most of these companies I mentioned to you are all bootstrapped.
Hmm.
So, we're
Hmm.
coming in, we're trying to do everything on the cheap. So how do you leverage these tools? And I think since, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been such a great amount of tools that are out there that you don't have to spend a lot of money on the expensive popular tools. It's actually even more innovative to leverage a lot of the new technologies because it morphs into some of the messaging that we're starting with as well. So that's when we started incorporating like sales, dedicated inside sales teams and people that were focused on like account-based marketing campaigns for these large target accounts. But again, what you really see is a lot of it, what we feel is new. It's a repackaging of things I've been doing my entire career.
Yeah, I'm curious when you contrast that with HatchWorks right now, what's similar in the, on the rev side and the setup, and what's changed for you guys?
So HatchWorks takes a little different approach where their focus is on not just developing complete applications, so not just focused on a specific platform like a mobile like mobile apps, for instance, but basically very focused into something that's a lot more transformative now, and that is basically cloud-based applications. So how do you look at this big picture of providing a modern architecture in a modern environment and a modern approach for developing products for people? And what we've done is we've gone out, when I say products, specifically software products. And so we've built our company, and this is what kind of attracted me to HatchWorks, was we built the company from the ground up to be we look like a software company. So these companies I told you that I worked with, for all these years, we had all the different roles that not just developers and not just designers and not just project managers, but all the different steps of of the critical roles that a software company, the company that's developing their own SaaS type products, would need to have, and including like product owners and product specialists. So like we focus in 3 core markets, which would be financial services, healthcare, and manufacturing. So those are the verticals that we're going after. And we literally have people that have been product owners, product managers from companies that are in that specific space. So when we go to work with a healthcare client, for instance, we have someone that has built healthcare products for Fortune 500 healthcare technology companies. And so we have that type of expertise. So not only do we build great products, we have that full life cycle from being able to saying, okay, what do we do to iterate on what the design would be? How do we create that? What do we do to deliver them some sort of visual proof of concept or prototype? Then, and once we validate that before we build, then we build that product, we roll it out into what they call an MVP, or minimal viable product typically. And then there you're able to do this in this agile development process that we've perfected our own. And to doing that allows you to basically, and what they call a sprint cycle, every 2 weeks is a sprint. We are literally launching the next version of that product. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to build you an app that does this, and at the end of 5 months or 6 months or a year when it's done, we hope it works right, or we really guessed what it was going to do. Every 2 weeks, we have the opportunity, when we review it with our clients, to validate that we truly captured not just the design, the functionality, all the integration components. So when you launch it sooner, less risk, and higher capabilities of achieving, or better yet, exceeding what our customers wanted.
Yeah, that's cool. Let me ask you, just because I'm curious, on the demand gen side, because you're VP of sales and marketing, what's working for you guys now?
So when I came to the company, so we just turned 4 years. I joined in the summer, in the middle of COVID. I decided to change jobs, but more
Brave
importantly, I
man.
guess yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't anything wrong with the prior job, but this just was kind of like, believe it or not, I won't say my dream job, but it was a job I dreamed of. It's
Mm,
just perfect, where I'm at the right place at the right time. And after this stage of my career, to be able to say that, it brings a happy smile to me. But from the marketing, so they had done so many things right. The last step was figuring out, how do we put together a sales model that can have repeatable, predictable revenue? And the sales and marketing being married together is such a critical component to that. I mean, there literally is a methodology called predictable revenue, and that was a book written from one of the earlier founders or contributors from Salesforce.com. And this is the model that they use for growing. And it's just such a great model. Is how do you bring people to come to you? And the challenge with companies that are services companies are, if you looked at our website, for instance, we look like a dev shop.
hmm
But I think I explained to you the difference. Yes, we do develop products, but we are literally like an extension of our customers' product department. Okay, so we're all those different roles we have. So how do you articulate that? And that's a real critical part on getting the messaging right, getting the branding right, and then how do we tie that into our value proposition so we don't get caught up in that Me Too commodity world that I mentioned, that I constantly try to steer from. we outsourced the marketing to a really, really great marketing partner that I've worked with in the past that really gets this communications part really well. So now we're in that part of being able to update all the areas that are that where we're communicating with our clients from the from social, all touching across multiple social channels to outbound campaigns, events, to our website, to we outsource our sales calling and email campaigning to third-party companies that do that space. And I find that they really have a great model for being able to do that if you train and onboard them properly. So to that end, our whole goal is how do you fill the pipeline? And that is our number one focus. So, and we're doing that by creating a high inbound lead generation. So that inbound lead is where we're focusing on now. And how do we turn that into, obviously, to cash it into sales?
Yeah, and you're doing so many touch points on so many different fronts. So when an inbound, what do you guys consider an inbound lead? Is it someone dropping on a contact us form on the website? Is it
Could
them,
be.
yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, so in this digital world, and I always walk gingerly on it because while I've lived in this innovative space, I'm still a human and a consumer that also doesn't want a lot of that creepiness that digital can kind of tease us with, right? So like, oh, I just got a notification that this guy named Todd Dorsey was looking at my site, but he didn't fill out a form. How do I reach out to Todd without saying, hey, Todd, I saw you were at my site and you went to three different websites, three different links. And so it's that balance to be able to understand that. But what we're doing is managing that through the amount of type of campaigns we're doing. And then we know then, for instance, if someone from named Todd or Todd Dorsey is come to our site, then we actually link that back with the different tools and applications we're using, saying, okay, so Todd was part of a campaign we did on LinkedIn on the 18th of March, and here's the activity that Todd has done since then. And we also know to kind of be proactively looking for people that were involved in those campaigns, and how do we turn them into marketing qualified leads or MQLs, and how do we evolve those MQLs into sales qualified leads, SQLs, or
Hmm.
and thereon.
Yeah, yep. And then at that point, you have an internal team that is taking
Well,
over the SQLs.
absolutely. So once our marketing partner is mostly focused on all the traditional marketing communications type of stuff, the content, managing the different channels and stuff. And like you said, once they've come to us and the leads are starting to come in, then those are that's when my sales team gets involved, or our sales team gets involved.
Yeah, yeah. And what's on the horizon for you guys? What's coming up in 2021, 2022? What's next for the company?
So we've developed some significant subject matter expertise in a couple of areas, and our goal is we're not pivoting from it, but we're expanding into being more specifically focused as a SaaS company. So again, we like what we're doing in this space, but we've developed some, I mentioned earlier, the healthcare space. So we've developed some specific technology based upon some of these product specialists we've bought. We have now delivered this to multiple companies that are solving some specific problems within the healthcare sector. So for instance, that might be the first product that we come up with that would leverage this platform that we put together that allows us to be able to develop the product in a faster manner, but more importantly, it would be more of a, like I said, a SaaS recurring revenue model, as opposed to just selling, here's your product and starting over again. Allows us to leverage our expertise a little bit further and continue to build in that specific vertical.
Yeah, and when did you say you're rolling that out?
Well, so I didn't say when we are. Our goal would be that we'd like to have that something done by the end of the year, and if nothing else, maybe we have something in a beta mode this year. The year's already flying by. Here we are, 2 more weeks. We're in Q2 already.
I know.
But ideally, we have something in that space that we could launch sometime in 2022 commercially. And the best part is we're still developing these solutions for our clients. So our subject matter expertise only gets stronger and more fine-tuned.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So as an organization, Are you guys going to be adding some headcount? What's going on with you guys? Kind of on a personnel front throughout the rest of the year.
So a couple of areas I didn't mention that would be relevant to that question is I mentioned we're like this full service company. So not only do we build the product, but we also stand it up in the cloud. A lot of the companies we're looking for are still early in their for clients. They're still early in their digital transformation journey. So they need partners, people that can help them to get there. And it might start off with one application and multiple applications, but it's also how do we get them into a cloud architecture in a lot of cases where they can start taking the data that these different applications we're delivering, and how do you make that data actionable? And that's a lot of what we spending time with our applications, whether it's analytics based, whether it's using artificial intelligence and machine learning for doing predictive type of things. And then that even brings us into a new market that we started last year that we're really starting to grow now, is the Internet of Things. How can we work with companies in that space to be able to leverage these IoT platforms that so many people have started to launch, but they don't know how to commercialize and they don't know how to monetize? So to that end, from the sales side, our focus is real big, and we specialize, even though we're cloud agnostic, we are a certified AWS partner. And so to that end, what we are doing is I'm probably going to be bringing someone on as early as April. That would be, I'll call them maybe a hybrid role. A sales engineer would be not the title, but kind of more the responsibility. Someone that can sell, but has a high-end technology background that would help them to understand overall cloud architecture and the value that that would bring. And then also looking this Internet of Things world, I've been in now for about 8 or 9 years, and I'm very comfortable with seeing a lot of daylight coming down the track here as far as opportunities in that space, and bringing someone on board that would also be focused in selling our IoT solutions into that marketplace would be something that could be on the near horizon as well.
Yeah, and what would you call that role? What are you guys going to call it?
The latter one?
Yeah. The latter one, selling into the IoT.
It would be, I would focus it at this time, it would just be more of a senior sales executive, individual contributor, but someone that would be very focused on managing focus accounts, a handful of targeted accounts. And then, because we've got the team, once we close them, that knows how to manage them and help grow them.
Yeah, great. And thanks for sharing that, Richard. And then to close, we talked a little bit about mentorship earlier. So I'm wondering, someone that's looking at you as a mentor, what would you share with them to help them along their journey, whether it's books or whether it's, your approach or, things that you've seen work for you or mistakes that you've made? I'm curious kind of, what you might share for them.
So I'd say, I guess the main thing I've learned, and I think one of the main reasons I do what I do, we talk about having fun, which is, I guess, always sounds cliche to people. But I think the fun, I have the most fun out of two things. I'm a change agent. So on the customer side, I love delivering this technology that's going to change how people's businesses operate. It's going to help modernize them. It's going to help them add jobs. It's going to help them be more profitable, to maybe be more sustainable. And then also, I like to, I love mentoring people. And so my recommendation that I've given since I've been in sales leadership now, I guess going on 25 years, is that don't chase the money. The money will follow if you do your job. If you become a specialist, if you're true to your customer, and think with I always say, put your customer hat on. How do you represent your customer, but while still working for your employer, to be able to do the right thing for them? If you focus on solving their problem, then they hit their KPIs, and then the money will follow if you're looking for money. I'm not saying don't do it for money, but don't chase the money will follow. And if you focus on that, you'll achieve a lot of happiness in your role.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great advice, Richard. Thanks. So thanks for helping us out here, coming on to chat. Everyone listening, I'll drop a link to HatchWorks career page, and also I'll be tagging Richard on this post. So if you're looking for a mentor, you're liking what he's talking about, then, ping him and good things can happen. So cool. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate you making time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Appreciate it.